our heavens for as long as man had the mind to look up.
Something frightened me, and I remember running back into the house and saying, "My God, this is for real. This is not a dream."
They reflect the light of our knowledge and the dark of our deepest fears.
They put this lens over my head. I felt a pain, and it was like there was a needle.
We don't know what they are, nor what they want from us. We can only say, they're here.
Beyond what is known lies an unexplored world of shadows and phantoms. A land that knows no limits of time or space. From the dawn of discovery to the nightfall of catastrophe. Journey through a universe of the unexplained, the unforeseen, the unbelievable. A place beyond reality where no question will go unanswered. A place where myth and legend are law, superstition a science.
Time for our journey to begin. Some call them UFOs. Many disbelieve. Who are you? Why are you here? They shone more in the sky than the brightness of the sun, and extended to the limits of the four supports of the heavens. 3,400 years ago, that description of strange lights in the sky was recorded by Thutmose III, an Egyptian pharaoh. Another early UFO sighting is described in the Bible. Here, the prophet Ezekiel saw an object of gleaming metal with brightness around it. The prophet's sense of wonder and fear has survived into our modern era. For example, this woman is witnessing a phenomenon, a close encounter of the first kind, the sighting of an unidentified flying object, or UFO. According to a recent poll taken in the United States, half of its population believed that the universe is inhabited by other intelligent life. The rest of the world cannot be far behind. Even more surprising, over 20 million Americans believe they've seen a UFO. 20 million people, just in the United States. When we think about UFOs, we remember the images presented in fiction. The reality, however, is somewhat different. One of the first modern UFO sightings occurred in the late 1890s. Airships were spotted hovering all over the United States, moving through the skies. Dirigibles had not yet been invented, and contemporary newspaper accounts at the time referred to mystic flying lights. What were they? Some say something out of this world.
It's interesting to note that in 1896 and 1897, in this country, in the United States, when we had an airship flap, when there were no lighter-than-air craft, that people also misidentified Venus regularly as airships.
In the 1930s, in magazines like these, the strange lights first took on an otherworldly identity. Until that time, the lights in the sky had never been associated with outer space, and after 1947, they would rarely be associated with anything else. It was on the afternoon of June 27th, 1947, that Kenneth Arnold, a pilot flying in upstate Washington, reported seeing a group of objects that flew, in his words, like saucers skipping over the water. The age of the flying saucer had arrived, and the world would never be the same. A
5-minute flight is restricted to a 3-foot altitude, since Mahler is not a licensed pilot, and flying saucers aren't recognized aircraft. A 2-seater, ready soon, may be the car or chopper of the future. Help wanted, a crew of little green men.
The 1950s witnessed a sharp increase in the number of sightings all around the world, and with it, more and more evidence that something unusual was happening in our skies. Even the United States government took notice, beginning an official Air Force investigation called Project Blue Book. Their files soon overflowed with more than 12,000 sightings.
Documents have recently been released that purport to show that the U.S. government 40 years ago captured a crash saucer and the bodies of 4 aliens and has managed to keep that secret for 40 years.
There's just too much documentation there showing attempts by scientists to try to explain this phenomenon, to just dismiss it as a figment of people's imagination.
If President Nixon only knew who was able to keep the crash saucer secret for 40 years, he surely would have brought that person in to keep Watergate under cover.
There is something that flies in our atmosphere that scientists for 40 years have tried to explain and still cannot explain.
I hope that those who are responsible for producing those counterfeits and trying to con the news media and the American public are promptly brought to justice.
But if UFOs are only hoaxes, they are widespread, and they have stayed on the front pages for decades. No one, confirmed skeptic or fervent believer, has been able to say for certain just what they are. And they aren't going away. Arthur C. Clarke once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This may hold true for the UFO phenomena as well. The objects that one sees may be completely beyond one's understanding. This is a close encounter of the second kind. Something is descending from the heavens into this woman's life. She has made contact. This is a close encounter of the third kind. This woman is coming face to face with something beyond her imagination. Her mind is no longer her own. She's about to undergo a terrifying odyssey, unprecedented in human experience. There's something happening around the world. Something strange.
Something frightened me, and I remember running back into the house and saying, "My God, this is for real. This is not a dream."
And it came towards the car that I was in very fast through the sky.
2 people came in, 2 aliens came inside the bedroom, and I was taken in aboard the ship.
When I was brought into the craft, I was brought into a room that was pitch black.
They put this lens over my head, and it was as though they were shooting lights, colored lights, into my head.
These experiences are close encounters of the fourth kind, physical contact with the unknown, contact that has been documented by a man named Bud Hopkins. Like many people who study UFOs, Hopkins leads 2 lives. The first as an internationally recognized sculptor and artist, and secondly as a researcher and guide, taking people on an occasionally terrifying journey through their suppressed memories of their bizarre experiences.
If this is true, it's the biggest story of all time. It seems to be involved with an ongoing genetic experiment, which involves taking sperm and ova samples, following people across generations in the same family, and the apparent artificial insemination of women and then a removal of the fetus later. It is so intrinsically unbelievable. It sounds so wild, and I'm the first to admit that. Yet it is going on.
Could you tell me a little bit about what these people look like?
Just this big, intense eyes.
Big, intense eyes. What color are the eyes?
Very dark.
Mm-hmm.
Shiny, very shiny.
The patterns that I'm getting from these totally credible people are incredibly similar, these patterns, and the physical details are so similar. The weight of evidence depends upon the repetition of all these details in case after case after case, and the weight of evidence here is enormous.
The one I saw most clearly was about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, I think. Sitting down. It had big almond-shaped eyes and a long, thin face, a little thin mouth and nose.
A larger head and almond-shaped eyes.
Large heads, large eyes, dark eyes.
I felt a pain in the navel area, and it was like there was a needle put into my stomach.
Things were inserted in my nose and things down to my stomach.
I said, you have no right. They said, we do have a right.
I have no reason to make up such a story. If I want to be known for something, this is the last thing that I would pick.
I'm not sure what their reason is for being here, but they're here. They're around us all the time.
If they're here, reports indicate that they are conducting some sort of experiment of mysterious dimension. Many witnesses describe undergoing strange tests on board these crafts. Tests involving examination tables, bright lights, strange sounds, probes, and needles. Most abductees describe a sophisticated kind of surgery that leaves indelible scars, physically and mentally. They also recall moments of excruciating pain. And when these strange tests have ended, the abductees are returned to their homes with no conscious memory of their ordeal. But dreams persist, shadow images of stolen time. What these people are describing is fantastic. How can it be that diverse people scattered around the world describe seeing the same thing? Well, there may be one explanation.
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons that people perhaps report similar things. One obvious one is that they have either heard or read or had some exposure to prior information somewhere along the line that they may not recall consciously getting early on. And the second thing is that many of these experiences in perception or misperception are based on common symbolic needs that people have and express themselves in similar ways. I think that people may have a need to believe in UFOs because we tend to look for solutions out there, for a guru to lead us to the promised land that is not from our own immediate area, that in some mysterious way the answer to our problems is going to come from out there someplace, not from our own backyard.
To this woman and many others, there's no question that UFOs exist. Still, many are not convinced. If UFOs have been sighted with such frequency, it's surprising the physical evidence is so inconclusive. It could be said that UFO witnesses are the worst group of photographers ever to hold a camera. But some say there is evidence that not only proves their existence, but explains precisely what they are. Is this proof that these beings and their ships exist? Or is it just a sophisticated hoax? Edward Meyer is a Swiss caretaker with a 6th grade education and a fantastic story. He claims to have had numerous close encounters with creatures from another star system. And what is more, he claims to have the evidence to back these stories up. These pictures have been analyzed by experts. They have been unable to prove any fraud.
Meyer claims that in January of 1975, he was contacted telepathically and guided to come into an area of the forest that was outside his village. And there he met with entities from a star cluster called the Pleiades, which is about 500 light years from Earth. And since that time, Meyer claims that he's met over 100 times under similar circumstances with the Pleiadians, as he calls them. During the course of several years, Meyer took hundreds of clear-color daylight photographs and about 8 millimeter film segments.
If Meyer has experienced what he claims, it's a revelation. And if he has not, then his case serves as a warning to those who readily believe what the naked eye tells them. For those lights in the sky may have many explanations. All one needs is an open mind. We must consider every point of view. For example, Philip Klass, a self-proclaimed skeptic who has made a career out of exploding illusions and exposing fraud.
In the 21 years that I have been investigating UFO cases, including some of the most famous, seemingly most mysterious UFO cases, I have found a few hoaxes. In my opinion, Billy Meyer is a not very clever hoaxer. And in fact, one of his movies that I have seen certainly involves using a small model suspended from a string, probably from a bamboo fishing pole.
First of all, the UFO community does not, as a rule, subscribe to claims of contact, especially repeated contact, and Meyer claims to have had over 100 contacts.
I would say that anyone who believes Billy Meyer's story probably also believes in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. To my knowledge, in 40 years, there is not a single credible photograph of a craft-like UFO anywhere.
UFOs may not be from outer space. There are other, even stranger points of departure. We must journey to those places now. Our first feeling upon looking into the unknown is usually fear. But fear could be replaced with wonder, for those bright lights might be a signpost, pointing us to something wonderful. If one really thinks hard about this most curious phenomenon, many possible explanations can be found. But perhaps the answer can never be understood until our minds are ready. Between fantasy and reality, there may be a middle ground.
If these things are actually taking place, I think that the FBI, the Defense Department, the whole U.S. government should be mobilized. But it never occurred, apparently, to some of these authors to report it to the federal authorities. They just like to go out collecting these tales, writing books, and publishing.
There's nothing I can say that will convince anybody in so many words. It's like trying to convince someone who's never heard of it that we actually walked on the moon.
To me, this is about the life of the soul. It has become the most spiritually enriching and psychologically enlightening experience I can imagine having. Whatever its origin, it is frightening, overwhelming, and in the end, extraordinary and beautiful.
A noted astronomer once said that the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine. We need to open our minds to ideas that lie just outside our full comprehension. For in doing so, we may understand this strange universe a bit more fully. They're here.
And Mysteries presents information based in part on theories and opinions, some of which are controversial. The The producer's purpose is not to validate any side of an issue, but through the use of actualities and dramatic recreation, relate a possible answer, but not the only answer, to this material.